India at the crossroads of empires. After the Mauryans, fragments and foreign kings. When the Mauryan Empire collapsed, India did not fall with it. It shattered. Like a mirror struck by time, pieces scattered, glinting in every direction. No one rose to claim the center. No dynasty filled the void. Instead, a patchwork of kingdoms rose and fell in constant motion. Some were homegrown. Others came from beyond the mountains. In the northwest, the gates were open. Invaders followed old trade, routes and river valleys, but they didn't just come to pillage. They came to stay. First, the Indo-Greeks, descendants of Alexander's legacy, carved out cities in Bactria and Gandhara. They brought coinage, sculpture, and new gods dressed in togas. Imagine this: Greek kings honoring Indian deities. Hercules standing beside Shiva. Then came the Shakas, or Scythians, horse lords. From Central Asia, they were followed by the Parthians, then the Kushans. Each wave left its mark. Each wave merged into the fabric. India was becoming something more than Indian. Languages collided. Styles blended. Art bloomed in fusion. Greco-Buddhist statues, scrolls etched in Greek, Brahmi, and Kharosthi side by side. Traders and monks crisscrossed the subcontinent. Temples stood beside stupas. Kings wore crowns shaped by Persia, robes styled after Rome, and still no one ruled it all. The south had its own rhythm. The Satavahanas rose in the Deccan, overseeing inland trade and the first major inscriptions in Prakrit, the common tongue. Tamilokam, in the far south, flourished with Chera, Chola, and Pandya kings trading with Rome and Southeast Asia. Pearls and pepper, gold and silk, all flowed through its ports. It was a mosaic, not an empire. But even mosaics tell powerful stories. This was not an age of unity. It was an age of connection. And India was learning to thrive at the crossroads as foreign rulers became Indian kings. And old traditions welcomed new winds. From this fertile mix, something extraordinary was about to rise, a new empire, a new golden age, and a cultural explosion that would echo for centuries. The Kushans and the Silk Road. When the Mauryan Empire crumbled, India became a chessboard of rivals. Yet, from the northwest, new players entered, riders who carried both swords and silk. They were the Kushans, a branch of nomads once feared across Central Asia. Their horsemen thundered down from the steppes, following the same paths as Alexander centuries before. But unlike the Macedonians, they stayed. They built something lasting. By the 1st century CE, the Kushans ruled a realm that stretched from Afghanistan into northern India. Their kings bore names like Kayula Cadphises and Kanishka, strange syllables that linked the grasslands of Central Asia to the fertile plains of the Ganges. They spoke many tongues, minted coins with Greek letters, and tolerated gods of every kind. And here lies the marvel. The Kushan kingdom became the beating heart of the Silk Road. Caravans crossed their lands carrying silk from China, glass from Rome, spices from India, and gold from distant lands. Bactria and Gandhara, their strongholds, thrived on this trade, buzzing with merchants, pilgrims, and emissaries. But wealth was not their only gift. The Kushans became midwives to an idea that would travel farther than armies: Buddhism. King Kanishka, remembered as a conqueror, also patronized monks and scholars. He sponsored the Fourth Buddhist Council, where new texts and interpretations shaped the religion's future. And as caravans rolled, they carried not only goods but also faith. From Kushan lands, Buddhism spread north into Central Asia, then across deserts and mountains into China, Korea, and Japan. Artists to found new voices. In Gandhara, sculptors fused Greek realism with Indian spirituality. They carved Buddhas with flowing robes and calm, human faces. The first time the enlightened one was shown in full human form. This Greco-Buddhist art would ripple across Asia, its echoes visible in temples from Afghanistan to Kyoto. Yet, like all crossroads, the Kushan world was fragile. Over time, rival powers chipped at their edges. The Sassanid Persians pressed from the west. Indian dynasties reclaimed the Ganges plain. And by the 3rd century CE, the once mighty Kushan Empire fractured into smaller kingdoms, fading into history, but their legacy remained. They had turned India into a hub of global trade. They had carried its ideas across mountains and deserts, and they had shown that even conquerors from the steppes could become builders of civilization. The Silk Road was more than commerce. It was a highway of faith, art, and ideas. And India, through the Kushans, became one of its greatest storytellers. The Age of Crossroads. The Gupta Golden Age. After centuries of shifting kingdoms and foreign invasions, India entered a new chapter. One not defined by conquest, but by brilliance. Historians would later call it a golden age. The Guptas rose in the 4th century CE, beginning with a king named Chandragupta I. His dynasty soon expanded across northern India, and under rulers like Samudragupta and Chandragupta II, the empire flourished. It was not the largest in territory, but it was mighty in something else: ideas. This was the age when Sanskrit literature bloomed. Poets like Kalidasa penned dramas so refined they would be recited for over 1,000 years. Epics like the Mahabharata and Ramayana, already ancient, were shaped into the forms we know today. Myths, morality, and memory flowed together, weaving a shared cultural fabric that outlasted kings. But this golden glow wasn't only poetry. It was also science. Mathematicians like Aryabhata calculated the value of pi, mapped the motions of planets, and even proposed that the Earth spun on its axis, centuries before Europe would rediscover the same. Decimal numbers and the concept of zero, born in this period, would one day change the entire world. In medicine, texts like the Sushruta Samhita described surgeries, instruments, and diagnoses with astonishing precision. Astronomers charted eclipses. Metallurgists forged iron pillars that still stand today, uncorroded after 1,500 years, defying time itself. Meanwhile, in bustling cities like Pataliputra and Ujjain, trade thrived. Indian merchants carried spices, textiles, and gems across land and sea, linking the empire to Rome, Southeast Asia, and China. Temples rose, adorned with sculpture and carvings that blended devotion with breathtaking artistry. Pilgrims and scholars traveled freely, drawn to the centers of learning that dotted the land. And yet, the Gupta Empire was not built on peace alone. Its rulers commanded strong armies, with war elephants and cavalry ensuring the stability that allowed culture to thrive. But compared to earlier empires, their reign leaned more on alliances, wealth, and prestige than sheer brutality. For a few shining centuries, India stood at the forefront of human achievement, a beacon of literature, science, and art. It was an age where knowledge and creativity defined greatness as much as conquest, but even golden ages have shadows. By the 6th century, pressure mounted on Gupta borders. From the northwest came the Huns, fierce nomads whose invasions shattered towns and temples. The empire, stretched thin, began to fragment. By the time the storm passed, the Gupta Golden Age was over. Yet, its legacy was unbreakable. The numbers we use today, the stories that still inspire, the scientific seeds that shape the future, all were gifts of this brilliant era. India had not only survived centuries of upheaval, it had created a civilization whose light reached far beyond its borders. Temples, trade, and transformation. When the Gupta flame dimmed, India did not collapse into silence. Instead, its energy flowed outward, reshaping kingdoms, faiths, and connections across the wider world. From the 6th to the 10th centuries, the subcontinent became a mosaic of powers. In the north, smaller dynasties like the Pushyabhutis and later the Pratiharas rose. In the south, the Pallavas, Chalukyas, and Rashtrakutas carved out empires that competed not only with each other, but with the sea itself. This was an age of temples, not just as places of worship, but as centers of art, economy, and identity. The rock-cut marvels of Ellora and Ajanta, with their painted caves and carved deities, told stories in stone. Towering gopurams and sanctuaries emerged in Tamil lands, filled with sculptures so intricate that even centuries of weathering could not erase their beauty. Religion was no longer confined to ritual and fire altars. It became monumental, visible in every skyline. Meanwhile, trade carried India's influence far beyond its borders. Indian ships, riding the monsoon winds, sailed to Southeast Asia, bringing not only textiles and spices, but also ideas. Hinduism and Buddhism flowed along these routes, shaping kingdoms in Cambodia, Java, and beyond. The great temples of Angkor Wat and Borobudur still stand as echoes of Indian thought carried overseas. Back at home, culture evolved in new ways. The Bhakti movement began to stir, poets and mystics singing of a personal devotion to gods like Vishnu and Shiva, often challenging rigid caste hierarchies. These voices, humble yet profound, brought spirituality out of the courts and into the hearts of ordinary people. At the same time, the subcontinent was not immune to conflict. The Huns had scarred the north. Now, rival dynasties fought for dominance. Warriors on horseback, elephant corps, and fortified cities marked this fragmented but dynamic era. And yet, out of the struggle came innovation in administration, architecture, and military strategy. Foreign travelers marveled at India's wealth. Chinese pilgrims like Xuanzang described bustling cities, thriving monasteries, and a land overflowing with learning. Merchants from Arabia, Africa, and even distant Europe sought its pepper, silk, and precious stones. India had become not just a regional power, but a global crossroads where cultures met, clashed, and mingled. By the end of the first millennium, the stage was set for another transformation. The rise of powerful new dynasties in the south, like the Cholas, would extend India's reach deep into the Indian Ocean. In the north, new waves from Central Asia would bring fresh upheaval. As Islam entered the subcontinent through trade and conquest. But before those stories unfolded, India of this era left behind something remarkable, a civilization that could endure invasions, adapt to change, and still create beauty that outlasted time, temples that touched the sky, trade routes that spanned oceans, ideas that traveled farther than armies. This was India at its height as a crossroads, not just of goods, but of imagination, faith, and human possibility.